My thanks to Barbara Francis. It's a privilege to be asked to speak at this event and to moderate the panel of speakers that we have tonight. I'm excited about becoming involved with this forum, and I'm liking the fact that we're describing this as more than just an association, but as a movement. And I think that term resonates quite strongly, and I can see from the passion and the committed nature of the organisers and from the people here tonight that we have a very good groundwork for a really great organisation. There's been a number of smaller organisations that have been formed over the years, but all of them have gone by the wayside because they haven't been as well resourced and well organised. And I really think that tonight represents a changing of the landscape. The potential for this organisation is enormous. There are over 90,000 owners corporations in Victoria as it stands. It's 90,000 buildings, and over 1.3 million Victorians today call an apartment a home. The We Live Here movement could have a realistic target of reaching, even if it reached just 10% of the amount of Victorians that live in an apartment currently. That gives a tremendous support base, and broadly speaking, it's the type of support base where that many citizens, ratepayers, taxpayers will have a strong, unified voice, and the government at the time will have no option but to listen to this group. There are a number of critical issues that are on the table for owners corporations in Victoria right now, and they do need to be resolved. And Barbara has touched on the short-term letting issue. There's also the example of the La Crosse building fire in Docklands and the potential for some dangerous or unsafe building practices and unsafe building materials. There's the ongoing need for ensuring that residents are not adversely impacted in their amenity and their privacy and their security within their buildings. And there's unresolved issues relating to the conflicts of interest with developers in setting up these owners corporations from the get-go. Let's take the short-term letting issue as a brief opening, because that is something that Barbara has touched on strongly. The Watergate building is, as we know, currently involved in the Supreme Court case seeking a legal outcome. But the outcome of this case won't resolve the issue. It will resolve the law in relation to one particular type of rule and in relation to the laws under the old Subdivision Act, not the current Owners Corporation Act. It will be, in broad brush, it will affect a number of owners corporations, roughly 35,000 owners corporations we believe, but that is less than half the market out there. So to think that the outcome of the Supreme Court action, win or lose for the owners corporation, will resolve once and for all short-term letting, the short answer is it won't. Something else needs to be done. And of course any legal outcome will only determine one way or the other, whether short-term letting is either lawful or unlawful, legal or illegal. There's no middle ground. And if I can put it out there and throw it out there as a hypothetical question for the room, is there a middle ground? Is there a place for short-term letting in some form or another? We could all think of some examples off the top of our head. Some corporate lets, house sitting is becoming very popular, pet sitting, house swaps, even night nurses and live-in carers. There are all these different degrees of short-term lets, and it's not going to be resolved by this appeal in the Supreme Court. To put some other statistics out there, if we take all of the hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, inns and the legitimate service department operations, put them together, tally them all up for Victoria, we have 30,000 beds per night available. 30,000 beds doesn't stretch too far when there are major sporting events going on in Melbourne, when we have more people coming here to live and to stay. The unregulated short-term stay industry offers an additional 6,000 beds. Cutting out short-term letting altogether may have an unintended consequences. it would reduce the supply of beds in Victoria, and it would increase demand, and the price would go up. And these are the sorts of things that our policymakers and our politicians have to grapple with and have to deal with. And the role of government is to regulate, to find that sensible middle ground. It has to balance the tourism industry and to encourage more visitors and tourists into Melbourne, while ensuring that apartment buildings do not become hotels. Because I don't think anybody here, and I don't think even the government would agree, that we want Melbourne to turn into the Gold Coast. Just on housekeeping, we will have some time for hopefully a couple of questions at the end, but what I would like to do is to get through all of the speakers tonight, and then we'll be able to have some very brief Q&A at the end. But what I would like to do is invite the Honourable David Davis, the Shadow Minister for Planning, to present first tonight and to go through his presentation. Mr Davis, as I said, is the current Shadow Minister for Planning, Local Government and Equality, and it's my great pleasure to welcome him to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and can I begin by thanking Barbara for the opportunity to speak, apologising for the fact that I have another commitment and will be attending that shortly, but beginning most importantly by thanking Barbara and Tom for and your group for bringing this together. I think you have touched a very significant nerve. There are genuine areas that have not been, I think, grappled with by governments of either colour through recent years, and the obvious focus on high density and higher intensity development, particularly near the city, but not, I might say, exclusively near the city, has brought up a series of problems. I'm very prepared to engage, Barbara, with your organisation and to seek to work through some steps that we might take to remedy those. I do accept Tom's point about the complexity of some of this. It isn't straightforward, and I do compliment you and your organisation particularly on the collection of some of that important data that puts this on a much firmer footing. I think we have to move from the point where it is, this happened to us in our building and we therefore need to do X. We need to get a broader and deeper understanding about what is actually happening across our city. Now, the point in Docklands here is that I think many of the amenity issues have not been tackled sufficiently until relatively recently. I mean, the basic services that needed to be provided for communities. So I think there's a first question of ensuring that where we do high density development, we actually have in place those background services and supports. And that is not just everything from the shopping facilities and the local church facilities, or the support that's required in terms of clubs and other meeting places locally. But it's also an understanding of supporting the amenity, and that is about traffic flows and traffic movements, access to buildings and the linkage of buildings to public spaces, all of which is impacted where there is not sufficient prior thought and prior work to make sure that large-scale developments are actually put in place in a way that is going to stand the test of time. I think the points that you've made about the legal position and the powers of owners' corporations are absolutely central. We need to have in place a system so that our owners' corp or bodies, however styled, are able to make broad decisions about the amenity in buildings. Now that's obviously got to be within a legal framework, and there is lots of history of the Parliament and the government being prepared to step in and ensure that those amenity issues are actually dealt with, that the legal framework is clearer and fairer, so that in the long haul people are able to live with security and certainty in their buildings. So I think this is a genuine gap. Somebody was talking with me in a building not very far from here the other day about some of the issues on the contracts that they've got with their building. I'm not going to name the building, I don't think they want to be identified, but this is I think this is not an untypical story for many buildings where there is a long-term service contract with some maintenance and they're not happy with the firm that's doing that work. Now, how do you move them? Do you go and try and do this under old-fashioned common law in the Supreme Court? It's a pretty tough road, and I take my hat off to the work that has been done with some of these important legal cases to put some substrate and some underpinning under the position of your building, of your buildings and your lifestyle. I think that the issue of short-term letting is going to be a difficult one. As Tom has pointed out, the incredible variation is there, but I think jawboning, as you seem to have done with some legal underpinning, but actually understanding that you needed to persuade the people who owned your building jointly to act, is a significant part of the way forward. It won't all be government action. I think some of this will also be the action of communities within buildings that are actually seeking to enhance and protect and secure their way forward. So I guess my message is that I think over a longer period, and I'm suggesting that the time period is well over a decade, there has been insufficient attention paid to the long-term position of people who buy into some of our larger buildings. And I'll give you another example, a very practical one nearby. I've been working with a number of the Owners Corp bodies in the C107 area in the city of Port Phillip. I've recently written to everyone in that area to make some very clear points. The government in that area has a proposal, a panel proposal for a very much a non-restricted height and density outcome. The City of Port Phillip has sought to put through a process, a public process, has sought to put an alternate and more moderate view. But even that, I don't think has thought through all of the consequences, for example, in terms of traffic flow and movement, thought through all of the challenges that will come in terms of services if a series of, and fundamentally the government is talking about more than doubling or even trebling the number of people in that C107 region. Well, that does require a lot of thought. It does require a long-term focus, and it does require mechanisms to guarantee the security for people into the longer haul. So, in conclusion, congratulations on holding this meeting. I really very much look forward to working with you and your organisation and other Owners Corp bodies across not just central Melbourne, but it's actually a point, as Tom has made, more broadly as well. We need to get things onto a firmer footing, and I fundamentally understand what you're saying and support your direction. Thank you.